For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection.
Let me thank the gentleman. Let me thank the gentleman from Virginia for his courtesy. Thank the Speaker. Yesterday was the 95th birthday of former President Nelson Mandela. What a joy to be able to hear that at the time of the celebration that we had here in the United States Congress, President Mandela, who had been ill for a period of time, had earphones on and was looking at television. The words that came from the minority and majority leader, Republicans and Democrats, the Speaker and leader, Republicans and Democrats, and various leaders of the House, commended and recognized that a man who had come from the tyranny of separation and apartheid, who had to be against his government in order to free his people, could be recognized and applauded, because when he walked out of Robbins Island, he walked without bitterness. And one of the greatest opportunities that he gave to the world was the idea that there could be a democratic election in South Africa. And from that time, he has been a man who's promoted peace, promoted love, but led his nation out of the devastation of separation, bitterness, with kindness and love. I'm delighted to stand on the floor today and say happy birthday, Madiba. Happy birthday, President Nelson Mandela. And if God's will, may you live forever onward in better health. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2013, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Wolf, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I ask my fourth question in a series of unresolved issues surrounding the Benghazi terrorist attacks. With only 8 more legislative days before the Congress departs for August recess, I'm increasingly concerned that these questions will remain unanswered by the time we mark the 1-year anniversary of the Benghazi attacks the week we return from recess in September. That is why I continue to raise these questions, to provide the American people have a better understanding of how little we really know about this incident, despite nearly a year of investigations in multiple committees. Unless these questions are answered by the committees, or rather by a select committee focused on Benghazi, as I have advocated for more than 8 months, the American people will never learn the complete truth. Today I am pleased to share one piece of good news before I raise the fourth critical unanswered question. At my request today, the House State and Foreign Operations Appropriations Subcommittee reported out a bill which prohibits funding from the Millennium Challenge Corporation, the MCC, from going to the country of Tunisia. Last year, Tunisia detained the first suspect in the Benghazi terrorist attacks, Ali Harzi, after he was deported from Turkey in the weeks following the attack. Tunisia, despite being a beneficiary of more than $300 million of U.S. foreign aid by the American people, refused to allow the FBI access to this subject for nearly 5 weeks. It was only after congressional threats to cut off the aid that the government of Tunisia reconsidered its position. Ultimately, the FBI interrogation team returned to Tunisia and was allowed just 3 hours to interview Harzi, with his lawyer and a Tunisian judge present. Not long after the FBI interview, Harzi was inexplicably released by the Tunisian authorities, and his release was celebrated by the terrorist group Ansar al-Sharia. Consider that for a moment the Tunisian government kept the FBI interrogation team waiting on the ground for 5 weeks before they ultimately left the country. Only under the threat from certain members of the U.S. Congress did Tunisia relent and allow the FBI team to return to interview the suspect for a mere 3 hours. Then, when the terrorist is released, there's a celebration. That's shameful. We lost 4 Americans in the attack on Benghazi, and a number were wounded, and 2 were wounded very seriously. Because of Tunisia's obstruction of the FBI investigation, the House has taken the first step today to send a signal to Tunisia and other countries harboring the terrorists responsible for the death of 4 Americans in Benghazi. This is an important and overdue step. Overdue because the Obama administration could have long ago suspended or terminated its payments to Tunisia or other countries that failed to cooperate with the FBI in this investigation. This brings me to today's questions. The fourth in a series of critical unanswered questions. Why has the Obama administration not taken any steps to apply pressure to countries that have refused to allow the FBI access to terrorists responsible for the Benghazi attack? After nearly a year of investigation, has the FBI had access to any other suspects in any other country other than their brief interview with Harzi? Even more importantly, nearly a year after the Benghazi attacks, why has no Benghazi terrorist faced any form of justice for the killing of 4 Americans, including a sitting U.S. ambassador? Reports indicate that upwards of 100 terrorists may have attacked the consulate and annex. We can't even bring one of those 100 to justice after a year. How is it that after nearly a year of investigation, and despite the full resources of the U.S. intelligence, defense, and law enforcement agencies, we are still unable to locate, apprehend, and bring to justice any of the suspected terrorists? One can't help but ask whether the administration really wants a full and transparent accounting of what transpired on that fateful night. The administration's record certainly does not reflect it. The American people may wonder if the government really wants progress made in this investigation for fear that it will no longer be able to hide behind the FBI investigation as its excuse not to comment on what happened in Benghazi. Consider that in May, the Associated Press reported, and I quote from the Associated Press, the U.S. has identified 5 men who might be responsible for the attack on the diplomatic mission in Benghazi, Libya last year, and has enough evidence to justify seizing them by military force as suspected terrorists, officials say. But there isn't enough proof to try them in a U.S. civilian court, as the Obama administration prefers. The men remain at large while the FBI gathers evidence. End of quote. If this report is accurate, it represents a stunning abdication of responsibility on the part of this administration to allow known Benghazi terrorists to continue to walk free because the President refuses to use military force to capture or eliminate them. When will the FBI be able to gather enough evidence to use in a civilian trial against them if they're denied access by countries because the administration refuses to use the tools of American diplomacy to bring pressure to bear on those countries? Additionally, there is a larger question of whether it is even appropriate, if enough evidence is gathered, to bring the terrorists to the U.S. for civilian trial. Benghazi was a battlefield, not a crime scene. Those responsible should face justice as enemy combatants, not as common criminals. As we mark the one-year anniversary of the Benghazi attacks, how can any of us really say to the families of the victims, or the wounded survivors, and we should know who the survivors are because they are heroes, that the U.S. has done everything it can to locate, capture, and hold accountable those responsible. I want to credit Representative Kay Granger, the chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee, that blocked additional funding for Tunisia. I hope this Congress will similarly hold accountable the other countries that obstruct the FBI's efforts to arrest or interview other suspects. It is increasingly clear the Obama administration will not. How many years will it take until any, if not all, of the Benghazi terrorists face justice for killing 4 Americans and seriously wound several others? I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I now move the House adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until noon on Monday next for morning hour debate.
After 2 days of debate, the House passed a rewrite of the No Child Left Behind law for elementary and secondary schools. The vote was 221 to 207. It removes the requirement for national standards and instead allows states to set their own standards. The White House has threatened to veto the bill. Live coverage of the House when members return on Monday. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi spoke with reporters after the votes on the education bill.